I was the second of 4 boys. I was born in 1944. We lived at 105 Ben Boyd Road on the corner of Lindsay Street. And after the war, when Mr. Moore, Walter Moore, came back to reclaim his house, which we were renting, he survived Shangi and the campaign in the Middle East, in the East. We moved to number 4 Highview Avenue, which was just across the street, a very large house which ran right through from Highview Avenue to Lindsay Street with a tennis court. It was a fairly run down sort of place. It was occupied and we had a tenant. Milk was delivered by horse and cart, bread was delivered in a horse and cart. The local grocer would deliver once a week in cardboard boxes. And it was an idyllic scene. Highview Avenue was not paved at that stage. There were no curbs and gutters. Cricket was played in Highview Avenue on the dirt. And my first memory is of the buses coming up the hill, up Ben Boyd Road, which is still the 263 route, with the little headlights masked over because of the war. When buses were moving, the lights had to be dimmed so they couldn't be spotted from the air. My father's car had similar little slits in the headlights. He was on petrol rationing, and being a medical practitioner, he had access to government petrol rations. My first memory, which is very vague obviously, was being placed under a heavy wooden table to sleep while my parents went out, or went dining or something for the night, or went out somewhere in case the Japanese bombers came and knocked the house over, that I'd be safe under a heavy wooden table. That was at 105 Ben Boyd Road. And I think we were about 6 or 7 when we moved across to Highview Avenue. There are a number of boarding houses in the area. Down by Neutral Bay Wharf there were a number of large places there which some of the English migrants lived down there, and they would come up to school. Down behind Military Road, where the Southern Cross Picture Cinema was, there was a row of houses on, I think it's Grosvenor Street and the next one back. There were a lot of very small cottages there which were low rent and cheap. In Hardy Street, in Laycock Street, in Bydown Street and Barry Street on the Military Road ends, there were some very small houses there which were occupied by people on low incomes, I presume. I can remember the names, but yeah, there was a sense of disadvantage for some, but it quickly changed, and we had an influx of overseas migrants, obviously then in the early 50s, from Europe, post-war refugees who came, and the first delicatessen opened in Neutral Bay, Corber's, I think it was, or the one down on Waters Road. There were a number of them, and these people brought a new life and zest to the place. A lot of people still had ice boxes in those days. We had a refrigerator, but and ice was a lovely commodity. If you could, approach the iceman, get him to chip you off a bit of ice, and you could suck it. I mean, a big block of ice, you don't see a big block of ice anymore. It all comes in crushed nuggets in bags at the pub. So they were heavy, and they were held with these terrific tongs that would close when you picked them up, and the bloke would have a burlap apron and cap on his shoulder as well, and he'd run along with these things and then just release them into people's. They had an ice box place where in flats there was a bread box and an ice place where they'd be left, and maybe even a milk box in some places. And you'd come out. Our milk was delivered in a billy can originally. With 4 boys we drank a lot of milk, and when we switched over to bottles it was 6 pints a day. And there was a copper. The copper would be boiled to do the clothes. Eventually we got a Hoover. There's a little propeller in it, which tore all the clothes to bits. But yeah, and there was 6 in our family, and washing was a big deal. A girl would come on Monday and help her with the house cleaning, and that was because we were middle class and well off. And sometimes there was a woman. Some women came to live with us. They were naughty girls from a girls' home or something who were being sent out in service to help look after children and go shopping and help around the house. And they would live in 5 days a week and then go off on the weekend. And then later on there was a woman, Mrs. Watling, who was an English migrant from Ermington, would come down once a week and polish the floors and vacuum the carpets and clean the windows or whatever. And there was a gardener who would come once a fortnight and help out in the garden. And then when I became old enough, I took over all that and became the gardener and handyman around the place. My parents were refined and had good taste and were well connected, doctors and doctors' wives, and there was various clubs and societies that would meet at our house to discuss things and play chess, and there were a lot of the migrant men who'd come over and were doing their internship at the hospital as doctors, and my father was interested in them and their culture and in giving them a helping hand, I think. Quite a few of them came through. Dr. Seatsma was one, and another one who became a well-known eye doctor out in the far west, Dr. Archie Kalakarinos was one of those. And young women who were going into the medical field at that stage. There were a few of them, and they were lively affairs with a 3-course dinner and wine. The dining table and chairs were cedar, and some of them were bought at Newell's auction and an antique shop called C.H. Dealey, which was opposite Bydown Street. Their furniture tastes were, I guess, is it Edwardian? They were stuffed chairs and quilted tapestry. And then we moved later on. Mum got some taste. She got into corduroy, and there was a shop in the city, Beard Watson's, which had lovely things, and she started to shop there. And we bought modern furniture in the 60s for our rumpus room. And the dining area, the informal dining area, was Swedish kind of pine table and ordinary chairs. The kitchen was not modern. The bathroom was not modern. And our rooms were just truckle beds or box beds in whatever the furniture of the day was. There was a bloke up on the corner of Ben Boyd, near the corner of Ben Boyd Road and Military Road, who made furniture. Frome, I think the company was. And he was a Czechoslovakian or a Hungarian. He made nice bookcases, and more the sort of early Scandinavian and post-war pine became, okay. And light woods and blonde woods. All the furniture, all our floors were sanded back from Japan to Cyprus or whatever the boards were, and polished. Well, they were cultured. They had original paintings on the walls from artists they knew. They had lots of books, and they always were up to date with the latest novels and histories and biographies, which my father would read aloud to my mother every night. The house evolved with us. We wanted our own space and our own sort of designs, if you like, our own fabrics. You could go into town with Mum and she'd say, "You need new curtains, pick some material." There was a magazine, I forget what it was called now. It was an English magazine, and each week it would have a nice room in it, and I thought, this is great. I used to draw my room and put all these butte curtains in it, and a nice chair, and colour it in with pencils. And I planned to enclose the veranda outside my bedroom and make it into a really cool sort of bachelor apartment, with a barber's chair and flock carpets and big windows and Venetian blinds, not those roller blinds, proper Venetian blinds. I never did. And then little by little, the bigger houses were knocked down and turned into blocks of flats. First the six flat model, such as we have next door, with no eaves, because timber was scarce in post-war period. And then in the 60s, the developers arrived and started to knock down the bigger houses and build 8-storey, 7-storey blocks of flats. One on the corner of Anderson Street and Wickham Road went up in a week. It was the first slip-form concrete building that I'd ever seen, and probably the first in Sydney. And one week it wasn't there, and the next minute there's an 8-storey building. There was a company bought the house opposite us on the corner of Undercliff Street, and there was a nice old house there which I very spiritedly helped demolish when they weren't looking. And an 8-storey block of units went up there by New York Holdings, and my parents were very aggravated about that, the loss of the view. And there was a giant crane on the site, and my father paid me to make a banner saying, get out, or go away. And I climbed on a Sunday night, I climbed to the boom of this crane and tied it on, which was pretty rebellious, and he paid me a couple of shillings to do that. This is the original entrance to number 4 Highview Avenue, Neutral Bay. You can see the name Strathaird faintly visible still in the white stone. Not sure whether the white stone was quarried on site because the ground rock is pink and yellow sandstone. You can see the pickaxe marks still in it. As you can in the entranceway, which is now sort of defunct, I used to have to sweep these steps and clean them with lime, hydrated lime, to get the moss off. There are little trackways for the water to escape, all carved into the solid living rock. And this was the main entrance, and there used to be a 6-foot high hedge running right along the top of this wall, which had to be clipped. And I was the guy that used to clip it. My brother tried it one day and fell from here and broke his head open rather disastrously. As I come up the wall here, you can see they've cut a new entranceway for the underground car parking, which is rather nice, with a big lintel on top. And further here, I'm out of shot. Because I didn't have much income, and I preferred to live by myself, so I didn't share a lot of houses until I went to Dumbarton Street. So these places would be cheap, and that was because they were on their last legs. They were going to be knocked down and they were just getting a bit of rent before the development. So everywhere I'd do the place up and paint it and get the thing nice and happening and make a pretty nice little nest for myself, and then they'd say, righto, you've got to be out by next week, they're knocking the joint down. So I'd move and I'd go back there and I'd take items from the house, doors, windows, things that I liked, and just, I'd have moved, they wouldn't know it was me. I'd just go back on the weekend and take whatever I wanted, rip doors and windows and light fittings and things out, and take them to my new place and install them. Some friends were living here, a bloke and his girlfriend, and they broke up, and I'd come to a party and had a really good time. I slept on the floor in the front room there, and they said, oh, well, we're leaving, we're breaking up and we're leaving. And I said, oh, I'll take over the lease. And I moved in and I took over the lease, all right. I started taking walls down and ripping the place apart and adding to it and subtracting. And then, of course, it was going to be sold for development as well. And I'd got so far into it, I'd done so much damage to this house that I'd be in trouble. When they said it was up for sale, I thought, I'll be in so much trouble, I'd better buy it. And I somehow got some money together and got a deposit and bought it. The gate came from my grandfather's house at Greenwich, and it was in a skip being thrown away. I thought I'll just bring that home and put it on. Anything, it's not just because it's old and I like that sort of thing, it's because it's got a bit of history to it. And that's the sort of the tone of this joint. I mean, it's rotting away like everything else, but it's all been a slow evolutionary process. This front door, I retrieved, shall I say, from a house in Eaton Street, North Sydney. Many years before I even had this house, I found this door. I really liked it with the etched glass, so I just took it. It was there and I took it. It's the stove from Highview Avenue. It's the frame of it. It's been too heavy to move. I mean to take it away. I want to keep it. When we moved from that house, I salvaged the stove, and a friend of mine had the premises up in Rangers Road, and we installed it there, and they cooked on it for 15 years, and then they split up or moved. I couldn't dare to leave it behind, so I dismantled it and brought it here. This was a front room with a door here, and there was a second room here with a door, and that was it. Just to allow a front room, a bedroom as it was, and then a kitchen and an outside laundry and an outside, semi-outside toilet. So I took all these walls out before I even owned the house, knocked them down, and started to install my little stained glass windows hither and thither. I really always liked the way light was transferred and transformed by coloured glass. So whenever we saw houses that were being demolished or about to be demolished, and it was even before that became people would recycle those kinds, they'd just smash them and throw them in and bulldoze the whole thing. And we'd start going around and pulling them out. That one came from a window of a house over in Point Piper, and there are two doors that match it. the lead light doors, which I've got in the wardrobe up in the bush. They're the wardrobe doors. So I just started seeing this terrible waste, and you'd see that it became, they didn't demolish houses, they just smashed them. And some of the wood would be recycled. And I've always, I built a lot of cubbies as a kid, and I got good at sort of salvaging anything from the streets. It could be reused or refurbished or transformed into something else. And it's become a way of life. I really hate waste, and I like getting things for nothing and doing things on the cheap. So that's where it started. And I and my brother became quite au fait with lead light and stained glass windows. There are these fan lights that came from a house in Cremorne, and when we got the whole 4 of them, there was just every hallway opening had one of these fan lights above them, and they're beautiful. And we called it liberating. If we got there first, we thought they were fair game. We were recycling them, making sure they were recycled.